How we doing, folks? So this is part 2 of our Chapter 6 guided program development. So in the first part, we designed the user interface for the fitness challenge application. And this part will be adding the code. So I am going to go out to my flash drive, my Chapter 6 folder, and my fitness challenge solution. And we all remember this beautiful user interface with the green buttons and labels. So just to remind you, in this application, we're going to be using loops. So we're going to be coding a do until loop. So we're going to loop until we enter the 8th value. So that'll be our loop control. So let's get started with our coding. Most of our code is going to be behind this enter weight loss button, but we are going to add some code under our file menu here for clear and exit rather than having buttons. Just makes a little bit of a cleaner interface for us. So I'll double click on my button, and the first thing we want to do is enter our comments, and in keeping time in mind, I've copied into my clipboard the header comments for this, so you don't have to wait for me to type it all in. You should all know how to put your header comments in here. So I have my program name, fitness challenge, developer name, the date I'm creating this, and the purpose of the app. This app accepts 18 member weight loss values, populates a list box, and calculates the average. So that's basically what we're doing here. So the first thing we need to do is turn option strict on. So I'll just type option strict on. Then we are going to go down to our button. And we are going to do what we always do when we start an application. We're going to declare and initialize our variables. So a comment in there for that. Declare and variables. Okay. One thing I've found when I'm watching students do these apps in this book is one of the struggles people have is trying to figure out what variables they need to create for these applications. Um, so if you're thinking about it, usually you're entering values in a text box. So if you're entering values in a text box, you know you're going to need a string variable that captures a string, and then another variable with a similar name where you'll be capturing it based on the data type that it's being entered in. So these are all weight loss values. They're going to be decimal. So I'm going to need a string weight loss variable, and I'm going to need a decimal weight loss value. So we'll start with those two. So we'll start with string. Oops. str weight loss as string. What did I forget here? Got dim. Dim. And then we're going to dim this. So, okay. So we've got our two variables, our string weight loss variable to capture our, we'll actually be capturing 8 weight loss values in here, but we're just using one variable because it's going to be done inside a loop. A string version of that, and then our decimal version of that will be after, we'll use that for validation. Okay, and then we're going to be calculating the average, so we're going to need a decimal average variable as well. So dim des, call this average loss. And that's what we're going to use at the end when we actually do the calculation. So we'll add all the values up and then divide by 8 to figure out what our average weight loss was. And we're also going to need a variable to kind of accumulate all of those weight loss values. So we're going to declare that as total weight loss. So in order to calculate the average, you have to add all those values up. So we'll name that our total weight loss, and that will be a decimal as well. And in the book, they're initializing this as 0. I don't think we really have to do that, but I'll go along with what the book says to do, just to make things easy for ourselves. So then this next section we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I'm looking in the book here. When I do these guided program walkthrough videos, I just follow along with it with the code in the book. So the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables are variables where our text for our message boxes or our input boxes in our message boxes are going to be. So when we actually write the code to display our input boxes, some of these messages we want to put in our input boxes are kind of large. So we're going to put those in variables, declare them up here, and then just refer to those variable names when we code our input boxes. It just makes things a little bit cleaner. It might be a little confusing right now, but just go with it. So some of these are title messages and some of them are error messages because we're going to do our error handling within our input box. So our first one is going to be called input message. And these are all going to be strings because they're just messages. String input message as string, and we're going to initialize that as enter the weight loss for team member number. Enter the when we actually display this in the input box, we're going to be concatenating team member 1, number 2, number 3 onto the end of this. So we're just going to end it with team member number. It seems a little incomplete, but that's because we'll be adding some more code in there inside the loop. Okay, so that's our first one. And then we have an input heading. And this is just going to kind of be the title for our input box. Like in the message box, we had a title. We're just putting a title in the input box as well. And we're just going to call the input heading weight loss. And then we have a normal message. So dim string normal. And our normal message is the same as our input message. So I'm just going to copy this one. I'm not the fastest typer in the world, especially on these laptop keyboards. String, null message, and then we have a couple error messages that we're going to set up here. We're going to use these variables later. So dim, this is our non-numeric error message. So string non-numeric message, and we're going to call that, or we're going to set that to error. Enter a number for the weight loss of team member number. So enter a number for the loss of team member number. Oops. So, and we will, when we actually display this, we will append whatever number we're on there. And then we have our negative error. So this will be our last variable for the messages. Kind of a lot of variables in this one. But setting this up now will make the coding easier for us later on. So this is our negative error. And this is for if the user enters a negative value. You can't have a negative weight loss. So, and we're going to put this as error again. And then we're going to say enter a positive number for the weight loss of team member number. So positive. Weight loss of team member number. All right. Those are our main variables that we have. Then we have some variables that we're going to use specifically for our loop, for our number of entries, our max number of entries and the number of entries, kind of our counter, so we know how many times we've gone through the loop. This is just kind of tracking the loop control variables. So I'll put another comment in for these, and we're going to say declare and initialize loop variables. I could put these in the same section as above, but I think when you're first starting out with loops, it's a good idea just to kind of separate these out so you know which ones you'll be working with. The first one is string canceled click, and this is just kind of a placeholder variable that we're going to use to set a blank variable if the user clicks cancel on the input box, and that'll stop our loop from running. It'll kick us out of the loop, kind of a kill switch, if you will. So we're going to say dim str cancel clicked. And we're going to set that to quote quote, which means nothing. We're setting it to nothing, so it has no value or a null value. Oops, I forgot. As string. You see, even I, who have been coding for 20 years, sometimes forget things as I'm coding. So don't feel bad if when you're coding you ask me for a question, I come in and look at something and I find that you miss something, because even I miss things sometimes. So our next one is our max number of entries. So this is an important variable. So this is what's going to tell the program how many times to loop. So we want to be collecting 8 team member weight loss values. So we're going to set our max number of entries to 8. So we're going to say dim int max entries, integer, and set that equal to 8. And then we're going to initialize our number of entries. This is going to be our counter, what we use to increment every time we go through the loop. So it'll start as 1, and that'll go to 2, or next time through. We're going to bump it up every time until we get to the max number of entries, and that will kick us out of the loop. So we're going to call this dim. We're going to call this int number of entries. So dim int number of entries as integer. We're going to set that to 1. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to capture our first value in the string before we jump into our loop. We want to see if the first entry is valid before we actually start looping. So we're going to be using on this one our input box function. And the input box is a function. It's a built-in function. We're going to, in a couple chapters, we're going to be building our own user-defined functions. But what a function means is it does something and it returns a value. So whatever the user enters in that input box is going to be returned to a variable. So whenever you're calling a function, you're always going to set it to a variable. So in this case, we're going to set it to string weight loss. That's the original variable that we set up here. So we're going to set string weight loss equal to input box the function. It has parameters. So our first parameter, and this is we're going to use these variables that we set up here, so we don't have to type all this text into this message box. And you see now why this is going to make it a little cleaner. So our first parameter that we're passing is string input message. String input message, and then we're going to concatenate number of entries. And then our second parameter, we're going to pass the string input heading. And then the third parameter, we're going to leave blank. So if we leave a parameter blank, that means we're not passing it in. So the input function has 3 different parameters. The first one is our message that we display, ask the user what we want them to put in the input box. The second one is a heading, and the third one is just for our cancel. Okay, and that's going to return to our string weight loss. So let's put a comment here that says capture first value. And then we're going to start our loop. And our loop is a do until loop, so we're going to loop until we get to the number 8. So we're going to say do, and you'll notice when I type in do, I get our IntelliSense pops up with our options there. So we do until int number of entries is greater than int max number of entries, or string weight loss is equal to string cancel clicked. Okay. So when I hit enter, it actually puts the end loop in there for us. So this is where most of our code is going to be going in here. We're going to put a couple if then else statements in here for our validation, but this is pretty much our loop. And I'm going to put a comment in here. It says loop until 8 plus values are input or user cancel. So then the next thing we want to do inside our loop is check if entry is numeric. So we've all done this before. We say, oops, if is numeric. So if our string weight loss is numeric, then I'm going to go ahead and put else in here right now, just to make things easier for me. So if our value is numeric, then we're going to convert it to our decimal value. So dec weight loss is equal to convert to decimal, and then our weight loss. Okay. And then we also want to check if it's greater than 0. We'll put another comment in there. If value is positive, say if weight loss is greater than 0, then, and inside here we have another else, so I'm going to put that else in there now, so we know to go back to that. So I'm going to code this portion first, and this is kind of where the the brunt of our code is inside the loop. So if the weight loss is greater than 0 and it's numeric, we know we have a good weight loss value. So this is where we're going to do all our work. We're going to put the value into our list box, that weight loss value. We're going to add the weight loss to our total. We're going to bump up our number of entries. Then we're going to set our input message back to the normal message for our input message. So we reset it so that it bumps to the next value. All right. So this is something new here, adding a value to a list box. A list box is really an array, which is just a list of, it's like a variable with a list of items. So our list box is called LST weight loss and has an items array. So we're going to go items dot add, and then we're just going to add in our parentheses our desk weight loss value. I'm going to put it in the list box for us, that whatever the user entered in the input box above. And then we're going to add that to our total so we can take the average later. So des total weight loss. And this is where we're going to use our little shortcut plus equals weight total weight loss, just des weight loss. So what we're doing here is we're taking our weight loss value inside our loop and adding it to our des total weight loss. So we could write this as des total weight loss equals des total weight loss plus des weight loss, but this is just a shorthand way of doing that. So every time through the loop, we're going to add our next weight loss or our entered weight loss value into our total weight loss accumulator variable. So that's it for that one. And then we want to bump up our number of entries so we don't have an infinite loop. This is very important here. If you don't do this variable, then you are going to create yourself an infinite loop, and this will go on forever until you hit cancel. The nice thing about this application, if you hit cancel, you can stop it. Sometimes when you do loops, you don't give yourself that option, and the program will run until it crashes. So this, we're going to say int number of entries plus equals 1. So that just means add 1 to this int number of entries value. And then this right here, string input message. We're going to set that to string normal message. And this is just resetting the value in our input box because the variable had a message and we're just kind of resetting it. We're going to set it with string normal message. Okay. And that's it for that. So I'm going to go in, another comment up here, add weight loss value and increment. Okay, so I think that's all we have to do inside this loop. And then our else down here is if they entered a negative value. So then we're going to set our string input message equal to our string negative error, because this is for the first input box. And that's just going to reset our, if we entered a negative value, it's going to continue the loop and display that negative error message back in the input box so we know we entered a negative value. So it won't let us enter those values. It'll just keep looping until you enter a proper value, which is kind of cool. It's kind of nice. And then in this else, this is for our non-numeric error. So we're going to do the same thing here. String input message equals string non-numeric error. Non-numeric error. I named that wrong. This is supposed to be error up here, so I'm going to go fix that. I made another mistake. There we go. Easy enough fix. Okay, so we've got that. So now we've got to get our next value inside the loop. So put a comment in here. We're going to check the values have been put and capture value. Okay, so we're going to use another if statement for this. So we're going to say if int number of entries is less than, so we want to continue looping. If int number of entries, or continue capturing values, if int number of entries is less than or equal to int max number of entries, which we put 8 in, int max number of entries, there we go. So if our number of entries is less than or equal to 8, then we want to capture another weight loss value, because our first weight loss value we captured above the loop, so we have to do that again inside the loop. So we're going to do string, I think to make things easier for me, I can just copy the line and do it up here. And there, good. That's all we have to do there. So we just capture the next value. Okay. So that's it for the code inside our loop. When we're done our loop, what we have to do is calculate our average. So down here, put a comment in, calculate and display average. So if our int number of entries is greater than 1, so we want to make sure that they just didn't hit cancel and jump out of the loop. We don't need to calculate the average if they did that. But int number of entries is greater than 1, then we're going to make our, remember we made our label for our average loss invisible, so we're going to make our label average loss visible equals true. And then we're going to calculate our average loss. So we're going to say this average loss is equal to total weight loss divided by entries minus 1. So we do the minus 1 because as we loop through here, we're going to loop more than 8 times. We're going to loop actually 9 times because remember, in a top controlled loop, sometimes it goes one more time. So we want to make sure we're only calculating or dividing by that number 8. So we're at number of entries minus 1, so we get the 8, not the 9. And then we're going to display that value in our label. Average loss dot text so equal to average weight loss is and then we're going to do our little here ampersand to concatenate. We want to concatenate our des average loss and we're going to convert that to a string and we want to format it one decimal place, so we'll format it F1 and then we want to concatenate on the end. So another ampersand concatenate space LBS, station for pounds. All right, and that should do it for our main code for this application. Actually, there's one more thing we want to do in this code and just disable the weight loss button so they don't just keep re-clicking it. So once they've clicked it once, we don't want them to do it again. So we're going to say btn weight loss enabled to false. All right, so we did a lot of code, so I'm going to save it, save all, so I don't lose anything, and we'll just give this a run to see what happens. Hope I did all my coding right. Pretty easy to make a mistake on these when you're copying code, but it's usually pretty easy to fix. So we start this application by hitting enter weight, and then we have our input box pop up, and we're entering the weight loss for team member number 1. Okay, so it's the first time through our loop, so we get the 1 there. So the first weight loss is, let's say, 10 pounds, and then we hit OK. And it pops up again, enter weight loss for team member 2. Team member 2 lost 11 pounds, 12 pounds, and then 11.4 pounds, 15 pounds. So we've got 5. We're going to get a couple more, 9 pounds, 2 pounds, and this should be our last one, 7.5. So our loop should stop, and it displays our average of 9.7 pounds. So looking at my GUI now, I don't like how this isn't wide enough and I can't see all my values. You notice there is a scroll bar so I can see them, but it's definitely not wide enough. So I'm going to stop this and we are going to go look at my GUI and just widen this up a little bit so my values fit in there. Okay, I'll show you one more thing about the we put all those messages in there for negative values and everything. So if I do this again, and I enter 9 and then I enter J. So now you see where that error message came up. It changes that input parameter to a message telling me to re-enter number 2 because I had made an error in there. Okay, so now if I enter um, -9, I'll get the negative message, error message in here. I hit OK. So it tells me to enter a positive number. And then I can go through and finish this up. If I hit cancel, it's going to do the calculation with just those two values in there. Okay, so that's it for that. We still need to code our file menu here. So coding this is just like coding a button. So we're just going to double click on the menu item that we want to code, and this is our clear button. So put our comment in here, clear out list box. Label. So when we hit the clear, we want to list it lost items clear. And we want to make our average weight loss label visible. False. False. And we want to re-enable our button weight loss. Okay. We have to do for that, and then we also have to code our exit button. Just double click on that. App. Close. So let's go out and resave this. And we'll test it again just to make sure everything works. Enter weight. I'll enter a couple weights in here. 8, 9, cancel. So it does that calculation right. Let's hit our clear button, clears everything out. Our exit button, that does it. So not too bad of a program. 70, 80 lines of code, not too bad. There is one last thing I want to show you, and this is going to be very, very important, probably the most important thing, and I've talked about this a little bit. It's debugging. When you're doing loops, you're going to run into some problems, possibly with things not calculating correctly. And when you're doing a loop, it makes it very difficult sometimes to figure out what's going on. You know, maybe the calculation's not right, maybe because it's looping 9 times and you want it to loop 8 times and you're not sure how many times it's going through. So an easy way to help yourself figure that out is by using a breakpoint. So this is debugging. And sometimes students are a little bit afraid of it, but it's really the most powerful tool that you can have. What this is going to allow you to do is, and I've done this with a few of you while I've been helping you with things, problems with your if then else statements and stuff like that. And it just makes it so easy. to find things when you are running into an issue and something's not behaving. Sometimes you can look at code for an hour and not really see it, but when you actually start stepping through and analyze the variables, it makes it a lot easier. So what this will allow us to step through the code line by line, stops the code, and we can step right through it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint right on our start of our do loop here. Okay, so if I right click here, I get a menu that pops up, and then I have this option for breakpoint, and I can insert a breakpoint. So that means when I run this code, the code is going to stop right here and allow me to step into the code and step through it line by line. So we're going to leave this here. We're going to run the code, and I'll show you what I mean. So we click enter weight loss, so nothing happens yet because I put the breakpoint in after this line. So I enter my value of 10, hit OK, and now we get this yellow highlighted thing. So this means right now I am in this line of code. So I can hover over everything here. My max number of entries is 8. My int number of entries is 1. And if I hit F11 on my keyboard, that'll allow me to step to the next line of code. Hit F11. Sometimes it'll display a little message box. You can just hit no. It'll ask you if you want to keep displaying that message. You can hit no. So now I've stepped to my next line. It won't stop at comments. It'll only stop at lines of code. So I'm is my string weight loss numeric? Yes, it is. So it's going to step to the next line. If I hover over des weight loss, that's 0 because we haven't executed this line yet. So I'll hit F11 again, and now my des weight loss value is 10. So it took my string weight loss put in here. So now it checks if my des weight loss is greater than 0, which it is. So it steps to this line, adds the value. No, we don't want to be notified of that. Adds the value there, adds the value to our total weight loss, adds a value to int number of entries, changes my input message, jumps out, and displays. So when I hit F11 on this line, it's going to display my input message again. So it'll step back out and back to my GUI for me. Okay. So if I entered this value again and continued, I would be able to step through this whole code again. Now this is very, very useful when you're running into issues. And I was kind of almost hoping that I would have done something wrong in this code so I could show you how we could use this to find an error, but I will probably have an opportunity to do that with all of you at least once as we go through these chapters or through these cases in this chapter. So that's pretty much it for our fitness challenge. Now, looking at the cases that I assigned, the first few cases are going to be very similar to this one where you're entering values in input boxes. But when you get to case 4 and case 6, those are going to be different. In those cases, you are not going to have to use input boxes. You're going to use text boxes for those, and just put your loop inside your code when you hit calculate. So in the past, when I've assigned these, students want to use input boxes for everything. You don't have to use input boxes for everything. The only time you really want to use an input box is when you're entering multiple values, like 8 of the same values. And those other cases, case 4 and case 6, you won't need to use input boxes. You'll be using just text boxes on those. And I'll explain that again when we get into the cases to you all. So this is it for our coding on Chapter 6 Fitness Challenge. Good luck. Have fun with this. And that's it.